Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining me today. My guest is author of The Dark Side of Disney, Leonard Kinsey. I found Leonard through a wormhole that begat because of previous guest, John Trespassion Mooney, who was an urban explorer. If you didn't see his episode, definitely go check it out. He talks about all the cool places he's visited, and that really messed up my YouTube algorithm. So that's all that YouTube's been serving me since then is videos that are related to what John does, which I'm very grateful for that. So thank you very much, Mooney. Appreciate it. And during those that YouTube wormhole, I came upon Leonard. And I was super fascinated with the story he had to tell. This book is maybe about a decade old. It talks about how to have adult fun in Disney. Some interesting capers that went on around there. Some stuff that maybe shouldn't happen. Was cool that it was documented. And through that is sort of Leonard's story about what Disney meant to him, which is a really excellent part of the book. And I couldn't recommend this book enough. Definitely check it out. It's available out there. Leonard also is publishing other books at this point. We talk about that in the episode. He's a really cool guy. I was so happy to get a chance to talk to him. And thank you so much for Leonard for coming on. So check out his stuff and definitely check out this book. All right, peace. Bye. Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I'm your host, Soma79. My guest today is the author of The Dark Side of Disney, Haps, the Disney Saboteurs, Our Kingdom of Dust. Leonard Kinsey. That sounded like one book, but it was really three. I'm off to a great start. How are you doing today, Leonard?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Thank you for being here. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I found your book through an episode that aired a few weeks ago with my friend John Mooney, Trespassion. I fell down sort of a wormhole on Disney because we talked a little bit in an episode about the abandoned Wizard of Oz theme park, and which is somewhere in like North Carolina, and that got me down a whole wormhole about all this Disney stuff. And the idea of there being a dark side of something so glitzy and so perfectly manicured is always worth a dive into. So thank you very much for writing this book.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been quite a journey. I think it came out in August of 2011 actually, so it's been around for a bit, and it's fun to see people like you newly discovering it even after all those years. It's just really cool to still be talking about it, and it's still something that people are just so interested in, like you said.
Right, because it's not just this isn't just the guidebook of where you can steal a hot dog or something like that. There's your story goes into this as well. So even though we'll get into this, that I'm guessing some of the tricks of how to get around might be a little outdated now that it's been 10 years. But there's a story that goes along with this that keeps everything moving along. It's a really nice blend. I think that's something probably why people have appreciated it so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very deliberate. As you alluded to, I kind of knew that as soon as it came out, if it did any business at all, that Disney would shut down a lot of the tips and tricks. I mean, they're not all illegal, but a lot of them are certainly immoral. So they did shut a lot of that down. And so my intention was to balance that out, so it would become out of date pretty much immediately. Essentially, my intent was to balance that out with stuff that would never go out of date, which was the stories of me and my friends and people I know who were cast members there. And to me, that's like the much more interesting part of the book.
It is, and those stories, just real life happening at Disney is always it's because it's a place that we all go to agree to be part of a fantasy. So when real life gets introduced to it, that's always sort of an interesting thing. And I wanted to touch too a little bit on that film Escape from Tomorrow. I mentioned to you in the message that was a movie that really blows my mind. Are you familiar with that movie at all?
Oh yeah. Watched it opening night when it was first released, and man, it's not a really good movie, but it certainly is an interesting movie.
Right. And just for people who don't know, Escape from Tomorrow was a film that came out, I believe, around 10, 15 years ago. It was shot inside of Disney parks without their permission, or a lot of it was. There was a decent amount of green screen and stuff. But it was footage that was cobbled together basically by people who were shooting a film guerrilla style in the Disney parks until they reached a point where they kind of got made. And then, they cobbled together what they could after that.
Yeah.
I would say that it's like the thing you can compare it to almost the most like is like Clerks, because it's made at that level of production because,
Yep.
for necessity, but it doesn't have as strong of the narrative isn't as strong in this film as in Clerks, but like the visuals of seeing these pretty weird things occurring in the park sort of is worth the trip, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, I think like I said, it's well, I would say, yeah, Clerks is a valid reference, except that Clerks is actually a good movie.
Right. That's yeah.
I mean, I get they
Like,
swung,
this film not shot in Disney is a real like what is going on. Like if it
yes,
wasn't shot in Disney.
yeah, they swung really big and they missed on a lot of it. But as an experiment of what you can get away with, shooting in Disney parks, I thought it was pretty interesting. Um, just reading the interviews from the guy who made it, I got the impression that he was not a big Disney fan. He wasn't passionate about Disney. So for him, it was almost more of like he came up with this idea and he was like, "Oh, I know people are going to watch this because it was, it's transgressive because it was filmed in Disney parks." There's some interesting ideas in there. There's some really interesting visuals. Um, it just doesn't come together as a coherent whole. And I think the messaging's confused. That whatever statement he was trying to make, I don't think he was quite sure about what he was trying to say. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. And, there have been a few other movies since then that have been filmed in the parks. Even before that, there was a short on YouTube that took place in the Haunted Mansion that was really cool. It was actually made by some cast members. And it was like a horror kind of thing. And that was pretty neat. I forget what it's called off the top of my head. And then relatively recently, there's one called The Further Adventures of Walt Disney's Frozen Head. And
That
yeah,
sounds amazing.
they apparently every few years they unfreeze Walt's head, and he doesn't want to be stuck in this box in the basement of Disney World anymore. So he hatches a plan to escape and gets these kids to basically take him out and, in a box, his head, and walk him around the parks and show him the state of things. And it was actually a really good movie. So
That was shot like guerrilla style in the park.
yep, yep, with pretty good equipment. I mean, these days an iPhone looks really good,
Right.
so it's a lot
Yep.
easier now to do that than it was even back when Escape from Tomorrow came out. So yeah, it's a good movie. I would recommend that one.
And you also too, not that I'm recommending anybody try to shoot a film in Disney, you are in a place where cameras are welcome pretty much
Absolutely.
everywhere. So that kind of helps you a little bit though,
Yeah.
also, but they have more cameras than you do.
Yeah, not only that, but this whole Disney bounding thing where people kind of dress up in clothes that kind of look like characters. They're not full on costumes, but they come close at times. Dapper Day, for example, when people dress up all fancy, like those, you could get away with wearing a costume and still look like you were fitting into,
That's a good point.
whatever their dress code is. I'm actually kind of surprised that more people haven't made movies in the parks, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
maybe they will. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
go for it.
so one
Yeah.
thing that's interesting about the cameras, I think one of the parts that most people do know exists at the Magic Kingdom, though very few of us have been down there, is right is below the corridors that go below. People understand that.
Utilidors, yeah.
Yeah, that's utilidors, a word that I've seen written but not said out loud until now. But it's that it was really interesting how in the book you point out that the entrances, and this was back around around 2010 or whenever the photos were taken, that they're really hidden in plain sight, and that would suggest that they're also in the ease in which people go in and out of them. That would suggest they're not very heavily monitored. I'm assuming that has probably changed since then, because
Well, so you mentioned to me that you watched the Dark Side of Disney documentary, which came out quite a few years after the book, and they were able to get down there too. Um, and so I don't think there's a lot they can do to lock those down because they're so heavily trafficked by staff, and a lot of staff are coming in and out of them. Cast members, sorry, are coming in and out of them out of costume. They're coming in and out of them at the end of their shift, or the beginning of their shift, or to go from one land to another. And so That's yeah, I don't think there's much they can do about that. Now what they did do is they implemented a policy where everyone who's down there now has to have a cast member badge. You have to be wearing your badge outwardly. That didn't used to be a requirement. And if a manager sees someone, well, really, if anyone sees anyone without a badge, they're supposed to stop them. And so other than that, I don't know what else they can do.
Well, I
But
guess it begs the
yeah.
question of why don't they just put up a sign that says cast members only?
Yeah, because it would ruin the magic, you know. It's
Oh
the,
yeah,
the
that's a good
they
point.
they did theme all the doors so that they look like they just blend in, and I think putting a sign on it, A, might actually call more attention to them.
Wow, that's a good point.
And B, you know, you've got a sign saying cast members only in this kind of beautifully themed place, and it kind of takes you out of it a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I was specifically looking for them, and I talk about this in the book, like actually had a map and everything, and still couldn't
They
find
couldn't
the
find
damn
it. Yeah.
things. Um, which is in retrospect, it's just fascinating. It just shows like how well designed everything is there. It's really great. Like I'm impressed.
It is
Yeah.
that is one thing about Disney is you go there and you see a level of service and upkeep and thought that you don't see at any other place. It's like if Trader Joe's could have these people design their parking lots, we'd all be a lot happier. It's just everything is so well laid out and thought out, and they obviously they're racking in billions of dollars are going into people's pockets, but they do invest money into the park. They're constantly building and tearing
Yep.
down and doing new things. It's there are very few places like it, you know.
No, that's the Disney difference. I mean, that's what sets them apart from really everyone else. Even Universal is not on that level. They're getting there, but they're not there yet. And you know, that's why people keep going back. That's why people get obsessed. Um, you know, you walk into that place and the outside world fades away and everything's really I mean, they pump in smells,
Yeah.
cookies, there's music always playing. And you really leave reality and enter this kind of magical world where none of the outside world's problems matter. People get addicted to that. People love that, and people pay a lot of money for that.
Right. They're doing what good entertainment really has to do, which is sell you on your next experience while you're having your current experience.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they get you hooked.
right, yeah, it's like, and it's like on your way out the door, they already want you planning your next trip, and a lot of people are like, yeah, because you really just staying in a different resort. And I want this to turn into like us doing our ad for Disney because they sell themselves, but like just staying in a different resort can have an entirely different experience. I stayed at the
Absolutely,
Animal Kingdom one once, but when's the
I
last time you were at
agree.
a park? One thing that was interesting and I could relate to is the stuff I saw prior to us having this conversation. You seem to have these moments in your life where you want to talk about Disney, then kind of moments where you want to step away from it a little bit.
Yeah,
Where are you at now, and when was the last time you were at a park? I can relate to that with different areas in my life, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's these things you love, and then all of a sudden you're just like, I need this space.
yeah. It was. I mean, when the book first came out, it was overwhelming. It was about 3 years of just nonstop, like Disney 24/7. It seemed like. So I did get burned out after that, and it wasn't only that. You know, when I started to realize is that it was changing from the place that I really loved. They were doing things that I didn't like that were changing it not for the better. And what would happen is when I would go there, I would just get upset. I would get angry. You know, I would get depressed. Like this ride is gone now. They tore that down, or they took away this special thing that I always loved. And it was there was a lot of negativity, and I kind of was like, why the hell am I paying all this money just to like go somewhere and be upset? So I said my goodbyes to the Florida parks. I did a video specifically about saying goodbye to Epcot, and and really that was that for the Florida parks. And I haven't been back since. Now I've been to Disneyland multiple times, which does still have that magic. And I've been to Disneyland Paris, which I didn't particularly enjoy. Um, and there's a theme park in the Netherlands called Efteling. It's very Disney-esque, but darker. Like it's the real
Ooh.
version of the old fairy tales where people actually get killed and stuff, and or lose a limb or whatever. And that place is kind of that does it for me now. Like I love that place. So whenever I'm in the Netherlands, I always go to Efteling, and it's just got that vibe. Um, that
I love that country. The whole country is amazing.
yeah, it's just slightly off center. Like
Right.
everything in that country is just a little bit weird,
You
and
never know what's
in a good
around the
way.
next corner.
Yeah, in the best way. Like,
Yep.
and I love that. So not to offend anyone from the Netherlands, that is actually the main reason why I love the country so much. So yeah, I don't really I don't know, man. The Disney stuff just I think I got really burned out and really disappointed. And unfortunately, not that I don't keep up on it, because I do, it continued to go downhill like after I was already pissed off, and more things closed and they got rid of more things that were special. And it's only now, like within the past, I would say 3 to 4 months since Bob Iger came back, they fired the other CEO, came back, and actually seems to be listening to, like, because it started just not to just be me who was like, this sucks now. Like guests, normal people who were like lifelong fans and who weren't in it for the dark side, became louder and louder about, the decline of the Disney experience. And I think they finally started listening. I mean, when
So,
COVID happened, yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
I was so what really are some of those chief complaints? You mentioned that, rides turning over, though obviously new rides are something that do get people excited too. So there's a,
Sure.
there's a flip side to that. But what are some of the main complaints?
So I'll push back a little bit on what you just said, because the
And
whole
I'm
selling.
saying that because the new Tron ride might get me down there. So I might just be talking about
Sure.
myself, but I haven't been in 10, 15 years. So
Sure. So the Tron ride's a perfect example of doing it right, because like they didn't destroy Space Mountain and put Tron in its place. They just put Tron next to it because they had the room to do so. And I mean, Walt's whole sales pitch when they opened the resort was, we bought all this property. We have the blessing of size. We can do whatever we want. I mean, originally they were going to build a city there. They
right.
have all the space in the world in these parks. And it always frustrates me when they want to build something new, they take something else out. They just, like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, Snow White's Adventure, Horizons,
Right.
World of Motion, even the Maelstrom, the Norway ride.
Right.
They
Now
put
it's the
Frozen in there. Now
Frozen. Yeah.
they could have just built they could have built a
Right.
Frozen ride
They
somewhere.
have the room. Yeah.
Yeah. So that sort of thing really frustrates me. And usually, not always, but usually they're taking a ride away that has enormous capacity to fit in a lot of people in a short amount of time, and they're replacing it with something that like has half the capacity, which ends up making lines around the resort that much longer, because you don't have these, they call them people eaters. You don't have these people eater rides that are sucking up tons and tons of people every hour. So
Like
that's frustrating.
Horizons. I mean, that was one of them too.
That exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's frustrating. Um, the whole, one of the things that, so I'm going to Anaheim in a few weeks, and I don't even think I'm going to go to Disneyland. And the main reason is because they've made it so difficult to get on these rides. You got to download this app. You got to pay
Yeah.
for this, lightning lane. You got to log on at exactly whatever time when that opens up, and, make your reservation really quick. And there's no spontaneity anymore. If I'm going to pay $200 to go to Disneyland or whatever it is, 180, you bet your ass I'm going to want to be guaranteed that I'm going to see Rise of the Resistance, which is the
Right.
new big Star Wars ride.
You're paying for the magic. The magic shouldn't have to be giving your password to 6 different people and downloading an app.
Or planned 3 months in advance down to
Right.
the minute. I when I go on vacation, I don't particularly want to be looking at my phone all day. I would rather not look at my phone at all.
Right.
I don't want to be necessarily tied down to a set schedule. The parks used to be so great. You'd show up and you'd kind of wander around. And if you wanted to go on a ride, you go on the ride. If the wait was too long, you'd be like, I'll get it later in the day. That was nice. That was relaxing. That was a pleasant experience. And everything's so rigid now. And on top of that, with this light lane and all that, you really end up feeling like you're being nickel and dimed.
Yeah.
You go in, the first thing you do when you go into the parks, holy shit, parking's $30. So there's another $30 just before you even get into the place that you're blowing on this. Then you, of course, pay an extraordinary amount for your ticket. And then you get in. If you want to ride a ride, if you really want to be sure you're getting on it, you're blowing another $20 per person. So a family of 4 is blowing $80. That kind of stuff really bothers me.
Yeah.
It maybe doesn't bother other people. That is not what I want in a Disney trip.
No, it's, I mean, it bothers me too. It's absurd. And especially to your point about how they don't have to be tearing down all these new exhibits. Like if you had a few more of these rides open, and I know maybe there's slow seasons, you could have more open, and that would help, crush up some of the
Absolutely.
lines. And
That is
it's,
absolutely correct.
you know, I'm
Yeah,
sure a lot of these are decisions based on finances, and I'm not they have to appease a board and stockholders and blah blah blah. But like it's
probably.
in the end, it's Disney has a grip on the American public that very few companies have. That has a place in the heart of the American public that very few companies have. It's
Absolutely.
largely untarnished, though I'm sure depending on what side of the political debate you're on now, you may argue differently.
Yeah.
But I think it's Americana, and it's
Yep. It's they've built up a lot of goodwill over the past 100 years, and they've got a lot of great IP that people just love, intellectual property. These princesses, these Mickey Mouse, like this is part of people's childhood, people's lives. They've seen it their whole life, and it's important to people. Um, and it's interesting to me to see like how far that will take you. Like how far can you rely on that? How far can you rely on the goodwill you built up?
right.
Um, and then you start taking things away. You start doing, and
Cars
it's
2 was a good test of that.
yeah, there you go. That's a great example. And at some point people are gonna be like, no, no, that's not
Yeah.
enough anymore. Like,
It's funny. I've been finding that with Marvel, which obviously now is
okay,
Disney, that I had seen every Marvel movie opening weekend, whatever, earliest possible showing.
yeah,
And I saw Ant-Man. I loved it. The last one, I loved it. I enjoyed the shit out of it.
yeah, it was
I
good.
had some edibles, and it was about as fun could have. You could probably pick it apart. I still haven't seen Guardians 3. And it's like, I think I might have hit that point where I don't know what the reason is, but I'm like, okay, maybe I've had almost enough.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because you can't keep going. It's just at a certain point, if I have to change or they have to change, or you know
Yeah, because it's a lot of the same. It ends up being a lot of the same. And
right. And part
you
of it
know,
was I knew that the first two Guardians movies made me cry. They're
yeah.
emotional films, and I'm like, well, this movie is going to be the saddest of all of them. And it's like, and maybe I just got in my head in a little bit. I'm like, do I really want to go to this movie and have a raccoon make me cry? It's maybe I'm trying to live happier these days, but
I totally get it. I specifically didn't see it because I didn't want to see animals getting abused. And
yeah, I had a similar thought too. Yeah,
I'll watch it on digital because on digital at home, I could just skip past that part. In the theater, there's no skipping past it. Like I guess I could, do one of
right,
these, but
right. That part in
yeah,
the first Sandman when they blow the sheep up, I was always like, "Ooh, interesting choice." Like, is
yeah,
that always made me feel a little squeamish? It is
yeah,
very obviously fake, but
right.
like, it's real enough. You're like, you didn't have to write that.
Yeah. And I think, that's just James Gunn's, or that's not James Gunn, but that's like a weird sense of humor sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily like meant to like make you cry, I guess, or whatever.
it's
But
one of those things that if it happened on the pages of a comic book, while it would be grotesque, it wouldn't be as shocking as to see it played out in a comic book
yeah,
movie. I
yeah.
think,
Yep. Yeah. So,
like I'm
yep.
sure Doctor Doom has done worse to higher life forms.
Sure.
So, are you still located in Florida?
No, 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 no. So I was born and raised in Florida. Was there for the first 18 years of my life, and then got the hell out of there. So I'm actually in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been here for years. I go back to Florida often because I have a lot of really good friends who live down there, who I met growing up, and also through the book. And yeah, so I go down there a fair amount still.
That reminds me. So I was watching during some of my other, YouTube traveling. I was watching a video about the abandoned Garfield Nightmare ride, and I saw that some of the footage was credited to you.
Yeah.
And I just the episode of my podcast out this week is about an artist who works on Garfield, who does Garfield art. And
Oh,
Garfield
okay.
to me was the very first, like, that was where I fell in love with drawing and art and cartooning as a kid. That was
Cool.
it for me. And it's what I draw over and over. So I really
That's
popped
awesome.
when I saw that. So I'm guessing you have been there.
Yeah, that was yeah, I'd heard things about it and I really wanted to document that ride. It's at Kennywood and in Pittsburgh. And man, I was not disappointed. That was a one damn weird ass ride.
Yes.
And you don't even get the full experience because they gave you these glasses that like
Oh
reacted
yeah.
with like the lights and made everything kind of shifty, weird. It was like being on a drug trip. And and so I went on it a few times just to like kind of revel in how bizarre it was. It just maybe one of the weirdest things I've ever ridden. But now I think they've put it back to the old mill theme. So as far as I know, all the Garfield stuff is totally gone now. So I'm glad I got to go and just capture that kind of moment of bizarreness.
According to the video I watched, not only is it gone, it was destroyed on video to prove to the Garfield folks that it no longer
All
that
right.
wouldn't get out there at all. Which is it
That's
sucks because there was some kind of I like the ice cream cone with the Cyclops ice cream cone. I was like, ooh, that might be a cool tattoo. Like it got me thinking. And there was some really cool. I like Dayglow. There's some really cool Dayglow Garfield
yep,
stuff in there that
there
and
was.
it would have been really neat.
And
So.
that part was hard to capture on video. Was it Defunct Land? I think Defunct Land did that
That's
video.
probably what it was. Yeah, I
Yep,
think I might
yep.
have said Yesterworld, but it was
Yeah,
Defunct
yeah.
Land.
He did a pretty funny video on that. Such a weird ride. Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that, like, I do love local theme parks like Kennywood, because a lot of times you go into something and it's not going to be, a corporate whatever. It's going to be something really strange and weird that
Right.
was like the product of this one weird dude who decided to do this weird thing. And so I do still like going to a lot of the local theme parks around the US, around the world.
Because it's a bizarre impulse to want to do that. I'm guessing you're
Yeah.
probably familiar with Class Action Park.
Yep.
And I'm sure there has to be a little bit of that guy in almost everybody who starts one of those parks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody who's always towing the line between the thrill ride and the legality and safety of it. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Which is fascinating. I love that sort of stuff. That's definitely a dark side type of thing. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, so what? So I want to get back to the documentary a little bit because we mentioned before that it was very interesting and it was a little the response seemed to have been a little mixed. I will admit I'm a bit of an easy audience for something once I'm already excited in it about it. So I'm just excited to I was excited this conversation. I love the books. It was like it was really I was gonna like it in general.
Cool.
The part that really and it wasn't I saw some of the criticism was that I think people thought it would be a little bit more like instructional, a little bit more like, hey, here are these tips you could use. And it took a little bit more of a storyline approach to the narratives of different people who approach Disney in different ways. The
Yeah.
one that really captivated me the most is I wasn't expecting to see this young man who I don't know exactly how old he was. It seemed like he couldn't have been much out of high school, who was on LSD and
Oh, Logan.
Molly,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
crying during Christopher Cross. I was
Yeah.
just like, I didn't know what to feel in that moment. It's like I was feeling all these things, and I'm like, I haven't. It gave me a feeling that wasn't familiar to me, and I still I don't know.
Yeah, that's about what it's like hanging out with Logan. That's how it feels in real life too.
Yeah.
He's
He
he
struck me as somebody that if I took little parts of a lot of people I know, I could build myself a Logan, I think. So I
okay.
really know what it's like to be around. Like I could his energy is an energy I'm sort of familiar with, but it's just,
Yeah, that that was one of my favorite parts of that is Logan being involved, and he'd been a fan of the book since day one, and I'd hung out with him numerous times. He's just a really sweet guy. Um, definitely one of those people who uses Disney as a form of escapism. Um, in addition to real drugs, he uses it as a drug. Uh, but but yeah, cool guy. Like him a lot.
is he someone you still talk to this day
Oh
or
yeah, 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 definitely.
so
Yep.
he's doing okay?
He's doing all right. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Um,
Yeah. He
but
seemed like a very earnest human being, which is something that's, kind of hard to fake. It seemed like somebody who you kind of felt the positive energy coming off of him.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And yeah, the documentary was interesting. So as you alluded to, it did kind of get mixed reception. So Philip Swift, the director, had done a movie called The Bubble, which was about Celebration, Florida, which is the town that was built by Disney, was owned by Disney, and kind of a dark side of that. Like there was, murders that happened there, swinger parties, like so I loved it. Like it was right up my alley, obviously. So when he came to me about the idea of doing a documentary based on the book, I was like, holy shit, like this guy's he's a legit good director. He's very talented behind the camera. He knows how to put a story together. He's passionate about the subject. And I was like, someone could easily have made a documentary based around the book and not even involve me, not ask my permission. It's not like I can trademark the dark side of Disney. It's got the name Disney in it. Like, so he came to me very respectfully with this plan. And the plan was essentially, like you said, to kind of use the book as a series of challenges and like go through it and see if we can do like this thing that was in the book and this thing that was in the book. And I was like, okay, that sounds awesome. I would totally watch that. I don't know how involved I want to be about that because I don't want people getting pissed off of me all over again. So if you guys do that, it's all on you, but I'll be like the wise advisor that pops in and out of the movie, kind of advising you guys on how to do this or how to do that. So what it turned, good. Philip's an amazing guy. His wife got pregnant during the filming of that. And by the end of
baby marmalade.
Yeah. By the end of it, in the editing process, they'd had the kid and he was obsessed, as any first-time dad should be with their child. And a lot of that bled into the movie when I don't think the movie should, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, don't think the movie should have had there shouldn't have been a baby in it. And that's the end credits is like,
there was a lot of there's a lot
baby
there.
Yeah. So I think his personal life kind of really took over some of the narrative of that movie in ways that was maybe a little too sentimental, a little too sweet for the audience.
It's a little bit like when every stand-up comedian has his first child or their first child, the first special back, you're like, all right, now we're going to hear about the kids. Right. You're like, all right, this one might not be for me.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of cringy, or it's like, the 80s hair metal guy who, is this partier, and then he has his first kid and he writes a ballad about the kid, and you're just like, oh
man,
dude, really?
Yeah.
That's what it felt like to a lot of people, I feel. And so and the other thing was he kind of quickly abandoned the idea of using the book as a set of challenges. Not that they didn't do some of them. They did go down to the utilidors. They did go up to the Image Works, the abandoned area in Imagination. But what was, interesting, if you go on YouTube and you look at my videos of the utilidors that I filmed years ago with a little, I think it was a high 8 camcorder, analog camcorder. They went down there and filmed with an iPhone. The footage doesn't look any better than it did back in 95 or whenever I filmed that, 97. And so I think a lot of people were expecting to get like Steadicam footage down the utilidors, right. and it still ended up being very guerrilla style looking, which I get, because you can't be filming down there. If someone sees you filming there, you're caught immediately. Yeah. So I liked the idea of what he did, which was kind of highlighting adult Disney fans, what it means to be an adult Disney fan, and how different people come at Disney and what they get from Disney. The part about Hoot and Chief I thought was very touching. Yes. The people who explored Horizons, jumped out of the ride vehicles, and that was really sweet. And I was happy for the most part. I wasn't thrilled with the kids stuff, but I was happy with the movie. But the reaction from certain people doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, that you have anything as popular as Disney, it's going to be impossible to please everybody.
Yeah.
And, there's only, you have to kind of like set your expectations, I think, at an appropriate level too, for what somebody can really do to kind of, it's almost like when the Blair Witch Project came out and there were people who swore that it was real before it came out. And I'm just like, come on, people. Like, come on, like, just set your expectations back a little bit. And
I mean, I think so, we did get, the things people were looking for, like hardcore sex in the parks on video, like, and it's like,
who wants to see that?
Philip, I think Philip quickly realized, like, no, who wants to see that? Apparently some people did. I think if the movie had not been called The Dark Side of Disney and didn't have ties to the book, it would have been much better received.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, because it didn't deliver on some of the more salacious parts of the book, and that's of
Exactly.
course what some people are going to want to like.
That's
You know,
exactly right.
be most
Yep.
interested in it. So,
Yep.
so to that point, is there? I guess I was going to ask if there's anything in the book you could still do, but I feel like that's really a dumb question to ask because I don't want to. If there is, I'm not really going to out it. But I mean, I'm assuming that in general, a lot of the holes have been plugged that you probably talk about in this book. Are there new holes that you're aware of that people are exploiting, or is it now just like so
Yeah.
much harder to do any of this stuff?
No, I mean, one of my favorite new things is they built this thing called the Skyliner at Walt Disney World, and it's essentially like a lift, like a ski lift kind of thing, the enclosed ones, a
Yep.
gondola. And
Gondola, yep.
and it's shaded to keep the sunlight out, so you can't see in or out of most of them. Some aren't. Um, and there's already been, multiple people posting pictures of them naked in there, pictures of them, obviously having sex in there. Um, and this is something that goes back to the early 80s when the monorail line from Magic Kingdom to Epcot opened. It's a 15-minute long ride.
Mhm.
Very often, not a lot of people doing that trip. So very often you get the whole cab to yourself. And there was this thing called Monorail Girl, this video that came out that I got on VHS. And it's this woman doing all sorts of things, totally naked in her own cab in the monorail. So this is like a long tradition of this sort of thing happening on Disney property. And it kind of warms my cold little heart to see it continuing on this new form of transportation. So yeah, I mean, they had to have known when they built that was going to happen. It's a no-brainer.
Right,
So,
right.
and
Especially too, where you're taking a place where they squeeze the sexuality out of everything there. And it's like, as we've learned at many points in humanity, you can only repress people so much, whether it be over, a year or over an afternoon. So it's
yep,
like, some people are, that I'm justifying turning the monorail into, you know, an orgy, but
right. But it always astounded me, and a lot of the negative feedback I got about the book was just people who were just horrified at the fact that there was sex, drugs, and rock and roll going on in Walt Disney World, and they legitimately
I'm like,
think like
late, it's
this.
going on at church. So
Sure,
it's like, it's going on at Disney too.
they think there's something about humanity where the
Right.
second they walk through those gates, all that gets shut off. Like you hit a button and none of that's happening anymore. It's like part of the book was just exposed that, of course, that's not true. We're still real life here. People are still people.
Yeah.
So that I always thought that was hilarious. So, but yeah, that as far as new things go, that's one of my favorites. I really like that.
Yeah. So you have also worked on other things that are not related to Disney. You're a musician and you've written a few other books. So what are you working on anything now?
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's kind of back to what we were talking before. The YouTube channel that I have was originally a promotional tool for the book, and it has videos of me going down the utilidors, a lot of stuff that people I thought wouldn't believe that I did it unless they actually saw it.
Right.
As I started getting burned out on Disney and started going elsewhere for vacations, it gradually morphed into a travel and events channel. So, but still with like an edge, like PG-13 R-rated edge. So I always describe it as like a PG-13 Rick Steves.
Mhm.
Still well researched, still well shot, well edited, color corrected, everything, but it's edgier.
Yeah. Rick
So
Stone
that
the whole time anyway. So
and he's awesome. I
yeah,
love
I
him to
love Rick
death.
Steves.
And he's a lot. I think he's a lot cooler than people give him credit
Allegedly,
for.
allegedly. I don't want to just start making
Oh no,
allegations. Allegedly.
you're absolutely right. I
Yeah.
mean, he's been very vocal proponent of legalization of marijuana, and I respect the hell out of him for that.
Yeah.
But so that's a thing that I do. Traveling, doing YouTube videos in my travels. Yeah, I'm a musician. I play guitar, play drums. Um, actually mix a few bands, produce a few bands. The books. I did write two more books. They were Disney related, but they were fiction. They were novels, and then through that, when I started writing and releasing books, they were self-published. No one wanted to take on Disney legal or potentially take on Disney legal, so the offers I was getting for Dark Side of Disney were terrible, or I just wasn't getting people wouldn't give me an offer. So I self-published. It became a big hit. Wrote the second one. That was very well received critically, Our Kingdom of Dust. And I'd made up a fake publishing company, fake Bamboo Forest Publishing. And when those two books did as well as they did, and people started sending submissions to Bamboo Forest Publishing to get published. And at that point, I had a really good team. I had a good graphic artist, a good layout designer, great editor. I had all my production paths lined up, printer, distributor. So I was like, why not? Like, why not publish these people's books? So I got into the publishing business, and to this day, I'm still publishing books. So I just released one by this artist or this author, Nick Poberski, who kind of writes these. I describe him as like Die Hard in Disney World. It's kind of like action thriller type stuff with this main character, Charlie Walker, who's just a total badass detective, and they're riveting. I absolutely love them. I wish someone would make a movie out of those.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
So yeah, Nick Poberski's stuff is great. He keeps putting them out, and I keep publishing them, and I'm his number one fan. So,
I'll check that out.
Yeah. His first one is called Hollow World, and it's great. It's incredible. And so yeah, so I've been putting out other people's books. Guy Jeff Blythe, who was the guy who directed the 360-degree circle vision film in the China Pavilion in Epcot. He wrote a book that I published, and it's just fascinating. Stuff you never think of, like where the hell, like you can't have lighting rigs or anything when you're filming 360 because and just the technical stuff they had to go through. This was back in the early 80s. They couldn't like color it out in, After Effects or whatever. They actually had to practically shoot this stuff. Fascinating story. Also back then, the cultural differences, the political issues of even filming something like that in China. Right. Just really, so it's been great because I'm a fan of these books, and there's stuff that I would want to read. There's stuff that I would buy. And so to be able to like put them out has been really like one of the better things that's come out of this whole Dark Side of Disney thing, meeting these really impressive people who are writing about really cool stuff. I love it. I love it.
So, I mean, to go back to what you kind of said at the beginning there, you released a book independently and it became a big success. That happens, what, 1 in 100,000 times? I mean, I know a lot of people who release a lot of independent books, they usually don't go anywhere. No. Were you prepared for the success that came with it, and how quickly did it come? No. And where did it how did it kind of jump into the mainstream?
Yeah, it was pure chaos.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I mean, I think I managed it relatively well. So, for perspective, I've been in a band that was fairly popular, but we never hit it big. I made a feature film that played festivals everywhere, got distribution at Blockbuster, but it wasn't like huge. So I had no expectations for The Dark Side of Disney, and it comes out and it's selling 600 copies a day. And it was just like within the first 3 weeks. Yeah, so it was crazy. It was absolutely batshit crazy. And
like, how many did you originally press up?
Well, it was all print on demand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't even realize that they were at that point then.
Yeah, and I would say 75% of the sales were also digital, were Kindle or Nook, and of course those just go out in the ether. Yeah. So yeah, it was wild. I mean, thank God, I did write under a pseudonym, which I still use, because I got a lot of threats from, I call them pixie dusters. People think Disney can do no wrong and it's this magical place where nothing bad happens. They were very upset, and yeah, it was a wild ride. And the cover model of the book, Draven Star, she started like joining me in the videos because I blurred my face and I wore a mask. So she was kind of the face of the book for a while. Such a great host. And actually because I'm kind of an introvert, so it was nice to have her kind of run interference for me. But people loved seeing her on the videos. So then the YouTube channel blew up, and yeah, it was just all this. So it was wild. it was a wild ride. And, of course, Disney Legal got involved. Thankfully, I'm really grateful that they didn't end up suing me, but they sure were thinking about it. So
Did that become so? How worried about that were you prior to the release when you might have had lower expectations just based on the reality of releasing a book? How worried were you prior versus how you worried were you like after you saw the numbers come in?
that's a good question. I was worried enough to do the best that I could to make sure that I wasn't doing anything illegal that I could get sued for. So there's no pictures of Mickey Mouse in the book. There's no so I wasn't taking their intellectual property and reproducing in any way. Um, and I knew that people had written travel guides about Disney that were not released by Disney, so they really didn't have a lot to stand by on in that respect. Um, so I thought I'd pretty much covered all of my bases. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because even if you have done everything right, if they decide they want to sue you, they'll just bleed you dry. Even if they don't have a case, you're still
Well,
going to
even
court.
look at the back and forth now between Disney and the government of Florida. It's like
Sure.
they are looking for what both sides are just looking for whatever little comma is not in
Yeah.
the right place and trying to find a
Yep.
way to exploit it. Because once
Yeah.
you start deciding you want to go after something, you got the
I
money.
mean, you don't want to. Yeah, exactly. You got to have the money,
Yeah,
and
which they
I
do.
sure as hell didn't. So when there were rumblings that they were literally actually starting stuff up to start a case, I definitely freaked out. Yeah, I was very worried about losing my house, my livelihood. It was scary. It was a scary time.
Yeah. Which for them, I mean, to some degree, that's a PR nightmare for them too, because it's
Yeah.
not like, what's going to stop you of not telling that story, and that's going to be short money for them. Because I think that was sort of the approach they took with Escape from Tomorrow, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons why a lot of people don't know about it, is Disney just decided to kind of just pretend it wasn't there for the
Yeah.
most part, and
Which was a
then
smart move.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really was. And it's a good example of how and because so few people know about that film. And if the film was a little more narratively satisfying, there might have been more word of mouth to it.
Yeah.
But it does when you're nobody was talked into the door on that movie to the degree that they probably could have, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And that is what I heard back, was exactly that. They didn't want to give my book any free publicity, because they knew that would be a national story that would, go viral essentially. Um, and and again, I think that was a smart move on their part. Yeah.
But to some degree, I mean, couldn't they? I know this is kind of a tough way to kind of argue it, but it's like, didn't you help them out a little bit? Where because now they could tighten up some of this stuff, and I don't know how much of the stuff they were aware of, and maybe just hope people didn't know about. I mean, because you maybe made more work for them, because maybe they figured that if only a few people know about this stuff, it wasn't a problem. But like, did you get the impression that they appreciated knowing this information, or was it like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it got back to me that some managers were buying the book for their cast members to be like, look out for this stuff. Like, this is our guide to like look out for people scamming us, essentially. So they were using it, yeah, as an employee guide. A lot of that stuff absolutely needed to be locked down. It was kind of crazy from a security perspective,
right?
especially post 9/11, that some of this stuff was available for people to exploit.
It shouldn't be
Um,
that easy to be able to find Snow White, which kind of sounds jokingly as I'm saying that, but it shouldn't be. I actually I forgot about this story before the start. I dated somebody who used to be a Snow White years before I had met her,
mm,
and it's just like the thought that like all these people that she meets every day it's frightening.
yeah,
You'd have reason to be nervous,
sure. That's a
Not just
perfect
Snow Whites,
example.
your Peter Pans, you're everybody, you're Baloo's.
Yeah, perfect example. And then the other big thing is, and it seems weird to say this, but again, Philip's movie explored this, is that at the time, for people of a certain age and a certain inclination towards, I don't know if I want to say that, maybe being more alternative, tattooed people, people who didn't have kids, people who were drinking, if they liked going to Disney, that was a hush hush quiet thing. Like, you weren't proud of that. You were
Right.
not telling everyone about it.
Wasn't
And
okay to be nerds yet.
yeah, and one of the things the book did was make it kind of cool to be a Disney adult, because it was a little edgy.
Yeah.
And now, like, oh, we can express our love for Disney by talking about this book. And so it kind of, because there wasn't anything like that out there. There was Disney for adults, put out by like Birnbaum, which was sanitized, whitewashed completely. And I think Disney for Lovers, which was just so cringy. It was obviously written by like some 65-year-old retiree. Um, so this was like the first thing that kind of like opened the floodgates. And originally Disney would not market to those people when that book came out. So I was essentially marketing to an audience that they didn't feel it was appropriate to market to. Now these days they're totally fine with it. They'll
Right.
put people with alternative clothes, hair, whatever, tattoos, they'll put them in their commercials and be like totally, yeah, this is great. But at the time that wasn't a thing. So yeah, I think I did do a lot of I brought them some customers, I think. And and I think that's cool. Like
No,
that's nice.
it's an excellent point. I definitely agree. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about when we talking about the adult side of Disney, and I never got a chance to go to Pleasure Island.
Mm,
Just the timing of when I happened to visit Disney. I went as a kid, and then I went a little bit in like the around 2010, 2014. Like that's sort of when I spent most of my
mm.
time there. Um, it's an interesting thought that one that it doesn't seem to really jive with my perception of Disney based on when I was there. Did you ever get the chance to go to Pleasure Island when it was in its,
Yeah.
heyday?
Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool.
What was it? So how fun was it? Like, because I couldn't help but wonder. I'm like, how fun did they let this get?
I mean, they had something for everyone. They had a club that had live country music. They had a
Neon
club that
Armadillo or
yeah,
Neon? I
yeah,
think.
they had
Yeah.
a club that had a rotating dance floor and played dance music. I mean, for me, the big one was the Adventurers Club, which was a very highly themed, multi-level bar where they had to put on kind of shows, and there were props that would talk to you, and it was
Yeah, can you walk
so
through a little
cool.
bit how that, because that's what I'm kind of most interested in, the Adventurers Club, because I've seen so many documentaries that kind of talk about it, but I feel like I've never really understood what the real experience of going in there was like.
Yeah, so the vibe is like there's this kind of uh, explorer, traveler, rich guy who's gone to all corners of the world and kind of bought these oddities, uh, pieces of art, weird objects, and he's decorated this place with them. And so, like, kind of everywhere you looked, there was something unique to look at, and and then they had this cast of characters who would it was like interactive theater essentially. They would walk around and talk to people, make conversation, point out something. uh there were even silly things like at the bar, one of the chairs, if you ordered a certain drink, like the chair would start slowly going down, 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 down. um and then every, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes, all these characters you've been interacting with this whole time get up on stage and kind of do a little performance, a little theater piece. And I was so immersive. It was just really like stepping into another world. And the drinks were really good too. And yeah, it's you know, I think the closest thing that I would say there is to it was the new Star Wars Galactic Cruiser.
I was gonna bring
Uh,
that up. Yeah,
yeah,
see
and
it now.
right, yeah, that's going away. I felt like it was really revolutionary. It was really well done, and they tore it down.
That's the one too that it's, I can understand why if you're going to walk away from the adult dollar to that degree, which Disney I think in many ways has. There I saw something else about how they tried to kind of make it a little more of a party area. They had some
Hmm.
violence and some drugs and I think even some prostitution down there, which I'm sure that's Disney doesn't want even a whiff of that. So I
Yep.
understand, if the climate is what the climate is. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Adventurers Club seems like something that is a really special experience that I hope they bring back at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that would be amazing. Absolutely. They've got their Trader Sam's bars, which are have a little bit of that vibe going on. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, really cool, cool place.
Yeah. I mean, Epcot too. That's something that gets talked about a lot in the documentary about how Epcot's not what it used to be. And I got to go to Epcot when I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
Maybe around I guess third grade, so maybe around like 1988, 89.
Oh,
And
great
then
time to go. Great time to
yep,
go.
Captain EO, Figments, all
Yep.
that stuff.
Horizons was still there.
Yeah,
World of
yeah,
Motion was
definitely
still
got to go
there.
on Horizons. On that trip, I got stuck on this is in the Magic Kingdom, but the Carousel of Tomorrow. We got
Yeah,
stuck
yeah.
on it, and it kept replaying the same one over and over again. It was like it's autumn again, and it did that
Yeah.
like 10 times in a row. We had
Oh
the
my God.
same thing. But
Yep.
you ever had any of those experiences where you're on Disney ride and something went wrong because and they had to sort of go, all right, hold on, everybody, while we pause the magic and get this back on track.
Oh yeah. In fact, that's happened on Carousel of Progress. Same thing. Not 10 times, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, those are kind of I like that. I like that
Yeah,
because
the glitch in the
especially as
matrix.
yeah, and as someone who's born and raised there, been there hundreds of times, it's kind of neat to see something different for once. You get a little rush out of it. So yeah, those kind of things are really cool.
To me, I'm a big pro wrestling fan, which I sometimes have a hard time
Okay.
admitting. But like, it's like at a certain point, once you realize the backstage stuff is more interesting than what you see on stage, you kind of become a different sort of fan. And
Okay.
so, if I was in the crowd at Disney and something went wrong, I'd definitely be like, I want to see how these dudes handle this. Like, I'd
Yeah.
be super like into that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting. That's another thing that's changed now versus when I wrote the book. Everyone's got a video camera in their pocket now. And
right,
so a lot of things that used to happen in the parks, fights, especially, people on drugs, behaving badly, peeing in bushes, puking in bushes. Like you heard about these things, but you never really quite believed them. Now they're all caught on video and posted to YouTube immediately or TikTok or wherever. And it really it definitely makes you think like, wow, this place is kind of trashy. But I mean, that was always happening. We just
right.
didn't see it.
It's not
Um,
hard to catch a solid buzz at the beer house in the German
that's the
part.
that's the whole point. Yeah, you're drinking liter beers. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's harder
Um,
not to.
Yeah. So I just think and people are so shocked and horrified, and I'm just like, yeah, this has been happening since the early 80s. When Epcot
Right.
opened, people were drinking around the world from day one. It
Well, it's
was
also too. It's like you've flown into Disney. You've spent some time in Orlando Airport. Look around what everybody's doing in Orlando Airport. They're being obnoxious to some degree. They're drinking at the bar. These are all the same people you're going to be waiting in line with in Space Mountain,
absolutely,
tomorrow. So like, get used to them.
absolutely. Yep,
You
I
know.
100% agree.
There is that thing too where I think all of us, I've lived in Massachusetts all my life. I've got a chance to travel along the world, but I've lived here my entire life. Like there are those few, and so I'm used to basically what people are like around here for the most part. There's those few places you go where you're like, oh, this is a pure segment of America. It's like we are
Hmm.
and even the world, everybody is represented. It is, you do see a different crowd there. You see people that you never would have seen, and it's one of the beautiful things about it.
Yeah, you're right. Literally people from all over the world. I mean, yeah, I always think about the Brazilian tour groups is like a big thing and that's such a cultural like difference. They and people get pissed off about them all the time. So but they're just being how they are and that's the culture. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's always
is
interesting to see that.
Disney is for all of us.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Worldwide, absolutely.
yeah. So what? So you have you been to Disney in Japan?
I haven't. It's bucket list because it's supposed to be amazing. So
Yeah,
I'm
I had somebody I work with who just came back from there
yeah.
pretty
What they
recently.
think?
Oh, amazing!
Yeah.
It's
No.
I can't even. Do you think Disney, obviously we both went when we were younger, we've been when we were older. Do you think Disney has kept up with the technology, especially now considering how much that they're able to do? I had watched this video, another like the Funkland video on the Lilo and Stitch ride, and
Mhm.
it's sort of like, oh, they still kind of to some degree nickel and dime everything, where they're just like, oh, we're just gonna replace it with this alien,
Yeah.
whatever. What I wanted to ask you about was over the past, I think even probably especially more since this book has come out, Disney has really gone out and paid for a lot of big IPs. I mean, I forget when the Star Wars and the Marvel deals went through, but it was probably
Mhm.
sometime around those areas. How do you feel? For me, I've always seen that as sort of a double-edged sword. Like, I guess if someone's going to own Marvel, it might as well be them. I'm not pumped what Warner Brothers has done with DC, so I think they seem to be doing an okay job. But how do you feel that what do you think that does to really the core business of Disney? Do you think it takes anything away, or if it's more good than bad?
So for the most part, I think it's good. What I mean, this is just personally, I really hate that they jammed a lot of that crap into Epcot. Epcot was originally didn't have any Disney characters in it. It had Figment. They made their own character for the park, but that was it. Eventually, they did bring Mickey Mouse in to do meet and greet stuff, but he still didn't end up on any of the rides.
There wasn't like Donald Duck in the full like sombrero. Right. That's now almost what I think of first when I think what Epcot.
Yeah, there was no intellectual property in there because they had a whole for all the Disney princesses and Mr. Toad, Snow White, Cinderella Castle. That's where all that stuff went. They had a park for that. There was no reason to put it in Epcot. And now, what I think it's done, and same thing with Hollywood Studios, it's really homogenized the parks to the point where they don't have their own distinct identities like they used to. And that's disappointing because they are theme parks. They're themed to specific things. So that I don't necessarily have an issue with Marvel or Star Wars or whatever being in Disney parks. When they shoehorn them in there, I think that's the disappointing part.
Yeah, we don't want to see Captain America in front of Cinderella's castle, which
exactly. It doesn't work.
At some point will probably be in like a major motion picture. Like if we wait long enough and they run out, they grind through enough ideas, we're eventually gonna get something like that.
Marvel and Disney World, yeah, that'd be fun.
It's well, even like Toy Story. I mean, that's something that they cram into Tomorrowland. They also put it into whatever what is it called now? It's not MGM.
Disney Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
Yep. It's in there. Yeah, that's what I mean. You've got
home of the Ugly Betty burger, the worst hamburger I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
that was a while ago. That was, I think, there was something where I was with somebody years ago, and she had to have medication right away and had to eat something, and so she got something quick and got the Ugly Betty burger from the place there, and it was not good.
Nice. I love stuff like that.
I love the perfect name for it too. I mean, I guess they warned us, but
yeah, no, I that's the other thing that's definitely declined is Disney food offerings. They used to be so great at all that stuff, and now it seems like the quality's gone down in a lot of places, which is unfortunate.
Do you remember as a child anything about Disney particularly scaring you? I remember being a little freaked out by Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I remember that messing me up. And it wasn't, I guess it's Disney now, but Return to Oz definitely twisted a few cranks in my head that took a long time to reverse.
Yeah. Oh man, Return to Oz is such a weird movie.
I saw it in the theater when I was a kid.
I think I did too.
Yeah. I don't know.
In fact, I'm sure I did.
Grade. Yeah.
I'm sure I did. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I just was a weird little kid because I always kind of really liked that sort of stuff when I was a kid. And Mr. Toad, you literally go to hell at the end.
Yeah.
Which is such a weird thing for a kid's ride. But no, I think I always got a kick out of that sort of stuff, to be honest. But I was super weird, but I was like really into horror movies as a kid and stuff like that. So maybe that appealed to me, that sort of thing.
I was kind of a giant wuss. I remember there was a time where we went to a haunted house when I was a kid. My parents had to almost carry me out because my legs just wouldn't work. I'd never been in a haunted house where there's actually people in there doing things. I think
like jumping out at you and stuff.
Yeah, I think I just expected there to be like a clown with like a big like spinning wheel that you walk through, or it's like a fun house or something. But
yeah. No, I mean, that's a big thing now at Universal. They have those haunted horror nights where people love that stuff, absolutely love that stuff, and get obsessed with it every year. There's a big buildup, and that's cool. And that's one of those things that it seems like Universal can do that stuff and can market that stuff that's kind of violent and edgy, and Disney still doesn't feel like they're able to make similar events because they're more family friendly. Are they right? Probably not. I'm sure they could get away with stuff like that, but they do still have an image to maintain. So
Right, right. I remember there were even rumors that Disney might be the company to buy WWE, and I'm like, I don't
Mm,
really see them fitting it in there.
yeah.
And because like Universal has had partnerships with WCW over the years and TNT and these TNA other wrestling companies. So yeah, it kind of belongs a little over right next to Jimmy Buffett's Margarita Land, like,
Yep.
because there's
Yep.
definitely a different vibe over there.
Hmm.
Which I'm sure is what Disney found out when they tried to get more of a nightlife down there and ended up with more, violence and
Yep.
whatever. I've
Yep.
never spent much time in Orlando proper besides Disney. Is there? It just to me seems like a whole lot of like chains and places. Like I was down there for business a lot, like doing conferences like the Ritz down there, like the
Hmm.
3-day tech events where like it sounds a lot more fun than it is. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, your impression is pretty spot on. I mean, there's a lot of like tourist trap type stuff that can be interesting. Some of those bigger mini golf courses are kind of fun, but yeah, it's a lot of chains, a lot of chain restaurants, a lot of souvenir shopping. Um, I mean, there's some cool things like in downtown Orlando. There's a really neat tiki bar, and but in general, that town is kind of built off the backs of tourism.
right.
So
And you made a good something that I definitely would echo that I'm sure is even probably even more true to this day in your book about if you are going to Disney, just stay on the properties.
yeah,
Like it's not worth trying to deal with, with it's they make it easy enough. You're not going to save any money. You're likely going to end up costing you more money and you know
yeah, and the resorts are really well themed. I mean, you're still immersed in kind of this environment that is not like the outside world. You still feel like you're part of that magic, and especially when you're on like a monorail resort or now the Skyliner resort, you don't even have to get in a bus or get in a car. They kind of put you around everywhere. Yeah, I still agree with that.
the other message too that I think is worth reiterating that you mentioned in your book is that we may be adults going there for adult fun, but this is somebody's really special. It's somebody in the park that they have is a really special trip they saved up for, and
Hmm.
we shouldn't be putting our adult needs ahead of these people's.
Yeah,
It's there for them.
yeah, especially now with how expensive it's become.
Oh my God.
They really are kind of pricing out the middle class. But it's not a lie that a lot of people save for years to be able to bring their family of 4 or 5 to their big Disney World trip. That's probably the only one they're going to take. And it really pisses me off to see some of these bloggers and stuff, making it all about them in the parks and getting people's ways and talking really loud during a ride because they're just trying to get content,
Right.
and shoving a phone, in front of someone's face and blocking a view for them. Um, some of these people, this is the only time in their lives they're going to see this stuff. And their only time, certainly, they're going to experience it for the first time. And someone like ruins that for them. That sucks. That's really shitty. So yeah, I've always been a big proponent of like, have your fun, but be respectful of other people having their fun too.
I will say too that I've probably been to Disney parks maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 times in my life. I've been to I flew out to Anaheim to go to the when the Tron Legacy movie came out. You're probably seeing a
Oh,
theme
cool.
here with Tron and probably the lights
I
probably.
love Tron. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
love it. So I went out there when they did the Big Bang California Adventure and stuff.
cool.
I've never really seen a lot of bad behavior out of other. I mean, I've seen people kind of like, maybe talk, deal with their kids in ways that as a single person in their 40s, I might disagree with, but what do I
Hmm.
know? But I've never seen a lot of terrible behavior though. Have you witnessed like behavior that you think really disrupted people or violence or
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, but I grew up there. We would go every weekend. So
oh yeah,
you
numbers
know,
game.
yeah, exactly. A numbers game. What was interesting to me was going to Disneyland Paris, and a lot of the stuff that we would consider totally unacceptable here, they just don't care out there. The cultural difference, people smoking in lines, like blowing smoke on people in back of them, skipping lines, uh, just running around yelling. And I'm sure at the Japan parks, it's like the complete opposite of
Right.
that.
Yeah. I'm sure
Um,
tremendously efficient in many ways.
yeah, and very respectful, and I'm sure
Yeah.
quiet, and but Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, I think it's just a numbers game. You know, you go there enough, and you're going to see certainly at Epcot. I've multiple times seen people way too inebriated and puking in bushes. That's a
Yeah.
common thing, especially in the summer at when Food and Wine Festival is going on. Oh yeah, that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, the challenge of having a drink at every one of the country's pavilions, which I think is around a dozen,
Yep,
is I'm not a drinker anymore, but it to me it's like that's gonna take a lot of people down. It's
especially with that heat, the
yeah,
Florida heat. Oh, you're just asking for trouble getting dehydrated and drinking that much, and a lot of the drinks are like sickeningly sweet, and you're just asking for trouble. Yeah.
yep, yep. But you can do. All right. Anything else you want to touch on while we're here, or anything else you want to promote that you're working on, or
No, just people check out the YouTube channel. I think if you just search for Leonard Kinsey, it'll come up, but it's youtube.com/darksideofdisney. And check out anything by my publishing company, Bamboo Forest Publishing. If you liked Dark Side of Disney, any of the books I've written, Our Kingdom of Dust, Hapst, then you'll like anything that we release because I curate it all. So it's all filtered through I'm the tastemaker in this respect. So yeah, give some of those a shot.
awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about that Die Hard in Disney World thing.
Yeah, Hollow World by Nick
hello,
Poberski.
yep, I wrote that down, and I'm
That
gonna
is
write it now in
it's
a handwriting I can actually read.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
It's
I'm very interested in that.
one of those ones where you see it in your mind. It's like you're watching a movie. He's so good at writing like that. I just
It's
love it.
awesome.
Yeah,
Can't wait. All
yeah.
right, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right, you
Thank
too.
you very much. All right.